Depending on how freely firms can enter the market, we can sort of differentiate between them. Whether the collection of firms are operating in perfect competition or an imperfect competition. Imperfect competition is anything not perfect competition. So it could be oligopoly, monopolistic competition, or monopoly, right? So whether there is a freedom of entry or not determines whether the firm operates in a perfect or not competition. However, freedom of entry is not necessarily unique to perfect competition, because in monopolistic competition you have freedom of entry as well. In other words, it's easy to enter the market without difficulty, let's say, without barriers. Barriers could be in the financial form, a monetary form, let's say. You may have to pay fee, register your company, and things like this. Sometimes it's in the form of capital outlay as well. Some firms require a huge amount of investment, right? If you want to open a hotel, you need a big amount of money. Yeah, initial capital will be high. So that could be a restriction to your entry to the, let's say, market. But today you have Airbnb, so you can easily enter the hotel market as well, hospitality market, just renting out your own flat, right? So you are in the hospitality market with the freedom of entry here. Yeah? So we'll define and we'll give examples as we go. Nature of product as well determines what type of market structure you are operating in. For example, if you have undifferentiated products or almost identical products, then you are most likely operating in highly competitive market. If you have homogeneous product or identical product to others, then you are in a perfect competition. Or you can differentiate your products. In that case, you're operating in a less than perfect competition. Although it's a competitive market, it will probably be imperfect. There is some differentiation strategy you have. Advertising maybe, packaging maybe, the shape of the bottle your beverages, for example, have, or degree of control over the prices also determine whether you are in perfect competition or elsewhere. Usually monopolists or anyone who is not in the perfect competition could control their prices, or they can determine at what price they would like to sell. Now, these are the characteristics briefly of two market structures that we're covering. As you can see, perfect competition. In perfectly competitive markets, we have very many sellers or providers or suppliers of goods. It could be infinitely many. It's a theoretical extreme, so it could be any number. But in practice, we may not actually see perfect competition given the restrictions, given that there is always imperfection in reality. And freedom of entry is unrestricted, so there is virtually no barrier to entry to the market. And goods are identical, homogeneous. They are not differentiated. If you're selling carrots, or if you have a milk farm, you are most likely competing with others who are selling very much identical product. Milk, you're selling it to Tesco, Sainsbury's, and others. Farmers don't usually retail them, they wholesale them, so the milk comes in containers. And you cannot really differentiate between two containers coming from two different farms, because there's not much of a taste difference here or quality difference between the milk, unless you actually skim it or process it. Then that's a different story, obviously. But for farmers, basically, they are almost, in many cases, operating in highly competitive markets. Carrots, cabbages, so farming, basically, in agricultural products are usually not differentiated. You cannot really say, actually, I have a premium carrot or premium cabbage, except by actually packaging it look like a premium cabbage, yeah? So there's not much of a differentiation between your product cabbages and others' cabbages, yeah? And as a result of this undifferentiation and not being able to set the price, because in perfect competition you have so many firms, individual firm is not able to affect the price. So it will have to accept the price given. So that means they face a horizontal demand curve. So I'll define that in a minute. Monopoly case is always one firm, one supplier, and one industry dominated by just one firm. So there's a huge restriction to entry. Monopolists can simply restrict your new firm's entry to the market by reducing the price to a lower level such that the new firms are not able to sell at the low price. Yeah, their costs may be higher than the price, but monopoly can do it for a short period of time. Or they could put many other barriers like patenting, regulation. Sometimes natural monopolies are much more better, so entry to this market may be not permitted by the government themselves as well. And nature of product. Usually it's unique because there's only one company producing the unique product. Yeah? So it could be prescription drugs. If anyone, any firm invents HIV drug or coronavirus vaccine, they probably will be going to be monopoly in that line of business, in that division of product, yeah, in that type of product. Yeah, they will be given the patent. Until the patent expires, no other firm will be able to produce these drugs. Yeah, I think this paracetamol, when it was invented first, it was patented. So the firm enjoyed monopoly profits for some years. Once the patent expired, a lot of other firms started copying, and now you have cheaper paracetamol. Back then, paracetamol was a very powerful drug because no other drug, for example, was there when it was invented, let's say. So it was able to cure many diseases or illnesses. But today, paracetamol is only used for pain killing. Yeah? Back then, it was, we didn't have this type of viruses back then. Yeah? Or the diseases that we have today that are even resistant to antibiotics even today. So, but evolution is different today, obviously. So, moving on now, because the monopoly is able to set the price on its own and also we're able to determine how many to produce or what amount to produce, they face a downward sloping demand curve. Because if they want to produce more, they would have to sell at lower prices, because then people buy it. If they want to raise the price, then they have to produce less, because people may not buy at high prices, right? So the quantity and prices depend on the elasticity of demand curve. So I've talked about these points already to some extent, so I'm going to skip this now, except this point here, perfect knowledge. In perfect competition, we expect, so we start with perfect competition, we expect the firms and buyers to be able to access the information about the product and costs of the firm. So it's available, basically. Basic cost structure of the firms is available to all firms. In order to produce an identical product to other companies' products, you should really know what they are producing. So in perfect world, we know what we're producing as a supplier. And also as customers, we know what we are buying. So it's like a business where if you want to buy their products, they actually provide openly everything. They are transparent in a perfect sense. So that's what the perfect knowledge case is. We allocate our resources efficiently, because then we don't find any difference between two identical products. We just buy at the given market price. So customers are not able to, individual customer is not able to affect the price as a result, and individual firm is not able to affect the price as a result. Yeah. So I talked about this a bit, so I'm going to move on now. Now, before we move on further, we need to distinguish between short run and long run. In the short run, number of firms could be constant. It won't change in the short run. To start a firm, it may take a long time. So in the short run, it's a time within which number of firms are fixed. No entries, no new entries. But in the long run, we expect that the markets will be populated by more firms due to market conditions. It could be incentives to enter or incentives to leave the market. Yeah. So in the long run, this is how the definition is now. In the long run, firms are able to enter and exit freely, or in the short run, number of firms is fixed. Now, in the short run, firms can make supernormal profits under perfect competition. But in the long run, firms cannot make supernormal profits. They make normal profits, but they still make profits. So we need to distinguish between the two cases here. Supernormal profit which is above average, and a normal profit, which is basically profit that every other firm makes from selling the identical product. Now, normal profits are usually positive accounting profits, but zero economic profits. And supernormal profits, usually above average profits, profits that cover accounting profits, and then there is excess of implicit costs as well. So we'll define this. I think you have this last week. Let's define what costs are first. So economists usually concerned with not only the out-of-pocket costs, but also opportunity costs. So we usually refer to economic costs as the combination of explicit costs, out-of-pocket costs, wages, rent, and material, and then the opportunity costs of conducting a business, or doing a business, or running a business, let's say. Implicit costs. What are these implicit costs? Well, these are the basically opportunity costs. For example, your implicit cost is basically wages forgone for this hour. If you earn it here, you would have been working, right? Or having a rest at home, or playing a game, video game, let's say, yeah? So these are factored into the economist's cost calculations. So your cost here, to be here, for this hour, your cost is basically whatever you paid to commute here, plus whatever you haven't earned. £10 an hour, for example, yeah? Something like that. So that's your cost of coming here and attending. Maybe even more if you have explicit costs. But I suppose your opportunity costs are not high at this moment because you don't have a degree. But if you have a degree and you work for a restaurant as a waiter or waitress, then you will have a huge opportunity cost. Because with your degree, you could have been earning much, much higher than what you would be doing, yeah? So right now you're learning, so your opportunity costs are lower. Average total cost incorporates the implicit and explicit costs. In that case, we can apply the normal profit assumptions here, that firms are able to make normal profits. Now, let's look at the industry's supply and demand diagram here. So the industry supply and demand is your usual downward sloping demand curve and an upward sloping supply curve. And this is the market equilibrium, PE. So millions is the quantity. And notice here, because the firm, an individual firm here to the right, is the price taker, is not able to determine the price. They will take the prices given and sell at that price. So this line here is their price line. So the price is equal to then, as a result, average revenue, which is also not equal to marginal revenue. So each additional unit sold will be exactly the same price, basically, because it's a horizontal curve here. Now, where do the firms sell? What quantity do the firms sell now, individual firm, given that there is a market demand determining, supply and demand determining the price? What quantities do the individual firms sell? Well, they sell the quantities that correspond to a point where marginal cost is equal to price or average revenue or a marginal revenue. So this is basically a rule where marginal cost equals marginal revenue is where the firms in perfect competition, in fact in all other market structures, firms maximize their profits. Now let's start with this point, Q1. Notice that Q1 units are supplied at the marginal cost of this amount, but this marginal cost is less than the marginal revenue the firm is getting for these products. So there's an incentive to produce more, because even if they produce more, they are still making profit here. Marginal revenue is more than the marginal cost. So each additional unit they produce brings profit. So why not to produce more? As they produce more, they eventually settle at this point, where marginal cost is now equal to marginal revenue. Beyond that point, basically, marginal cost is higher than the price. So producing beyond that point doesn't make sense. So they settle at this point, and this point, as a result, is a rule for maximizing profits. At this point, profits are maximized for perfectly competitive firm. That's also the Q max. Now, let's say a firm starts at this point where Q2 quantities are produced. But then marginal cost is above, this point is above the price point. So making this product is not profitable. Making that additional unit is not profitable. So they reduce quantities produced until they settle at this, again, the marginal revenue equals marginal cost point. That's the point where their profits maximized. Now, this may not sound logical or sensible. Compare the average total cost to price, and you will see why this point is important now. Why this point maximizes the profits. I'll move on now. Now, marginal cost curve is usually considered to be short-run supply curve for a firm. Why? That's because, let's see this. Let's assume that the firm right now on the left-hand side here, right now, sells the quantity Q1 at a given price P1, and this point is the profit maximizing point. I removed all other lines, and it's also the same in the slides, in the book. The price line is removed, basically, so that we have a better picture here. So notice this. This is the point is now where price equals marginal cost. Now imagine that something happened in the market and the firm's price in the market increases to P2. When the price increases to P2, what happens is that price is now above the marginal cost. Above the marginal cost. So firm now, in order to maximize its profit, will have to move production such that the price equals to quantity. So the firm then moves from Q1 to Q2. When you move along the marginal cost curve and supply the quantity required to maximizing the profits, then you are basically moving along the supply line as well. So marginal cost curve in the short run is a supply curve as well. It's also upward sloping. Now notice the case now. The second case where Q1 is determined by P1. So the price is higher here, and this is the profit maximizing quantity because price P1 equal to marginal cost. But in the market now, something happened and demand declined. As a result, price declined to P2. Price decreased to P2, let's say. At P2 now, notice that cost for this firm is above, or at this Q1 at the moment, cost for this firm is above the price. So that price is much lower than the cost of producing that marginal unit. So what happens now is that the firm now reduces the quantity gradually, where it then ends up settling at the P2, Q2 combination. This is the price profit maximizing combination as a result. Yeah. So these movements along the marginal cost curve are similar to movements along the supply curve. So as a result, we consider marginal cost as the short-run supply curve in perfect competition. Now you might ask, will the firm continue producing at any price that the market gives it? It doesn't. If the price is for a long time below the average total cost of the firm, firms usually exit the market completely. But if the price is below, just below the average variable cost, firms shut down in the short run. Shut down means ceasing the operations for a temporary period of time. Exit means exiting completely the market. Yeah, so there are two terms. Shutdown rule for a firm in the short run is when price falls below average variable cost. Think of it this way. This is your marginal cost curve, and we define it as a short run supply curve. But firm is not willing to supply the quantities that are corresponding to lower prices than the average cost. That makes sense, because if the firm is not able to cover its cost, it's a variable cost, because variable costs change with the production, right? Cost of production increases with the additional units, and that's where variable costs kick in. So if the variable cost is below the price, there's no point in supplying it. But firm can supply the quantities to the market if the price is above the variable cost, but could be below the average total cost. Yeah, because think of fixed costs. Fixed costs are usually fixed. You'll have to pay them whether you produce or not. If the price is just covering the average variable cost, why not to supply? Because if you don't supply, then we will end up paying fixed cost. So in the short run, as long as the price covers the variable cost, firm produces. And it ignores the fixed cost because it's sunk cost. It's a period cost. It's been decided long time ago, before even the production started. You pay the rent whether you produce or not. You pay the lease, you pay the fees whether you produce or not. So it becomes a sunk cost. Fixed costs become a sunk cost. So you ignore the fixed cost in the short run, and you produce and sell the quantities which are sold at prices above the variable cost. So you don't shut down in the short run if your price is above the variable cost, but if the price falls below the average variable cost, you should shut down, because it now doesn't even justify the variable costs of producing the unit, next unit. Right? So that's the short run shutdown decision. And the long run shutdown decision is when, if you keep producing below average total cost for a long time, but even if it's above variable cost, in the long run it's a loss, isn't it? It accumulates. So you'd rather leave in the long run if the firm doesn't get prices above the average total cost. Basically, average variable cost is below average total cost, but in the short run we are able to produce at the prices and sell at the prices below the average total cost, but we cannot really continue selling at below average total cost in the long run. So in the long run, decision will have to be made based on whether price is below or above the average total cost. So that's the rule for exit now. Not shut down, exit completely, leave the market, produce something else. Right, so this is the rule. If the price is below average total cost, in the long run, firms exit completely. Let's look at the short run profit maximization case here for a firm. So this is the typical average total cost for a firm, and marginal cost is actually usually J-shaped, but it's a straight line right now. So price is given here in the market, this is the price, and the firm has an average total cost of this curve, along this curve. Now, the quantities that the firm supplies are determined by the rule. Yeah, remember the rule is the firm sells the quantity where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So they're selling this Q quantity, and that quantity, the price is P, given P here. So the difference between now the price and then the average total cost corresponding to this quantity is basically the profit per unit. And if you times the profit per unit by the number of quantities, that gives us the shaded area, which is the profit. So this is called profit or economic profit. In some books, supernormal profits or above average profits. So if you're using different books, then these are similar concepts. Basically, they're defining the same concept. Yeah. So this area here is a profit for a firm. But now, if there is a supernormal profit in the short run, in the long run, new firms enter the market. So they enter the market to take advantage of the profits in the short run. And once the firms enter the market, what happens is that the market price goes down. Now look at this case. Now market price is now this price line here showing us the market price where the price is equal to average revenue and also it's equal to marginal revenue. Yeah? So it's now for this typical firm lower than the average total cost per unit. So basically costs are higher than the prices that market is commanding now. So the difference now is going to be loss per unit here. And firm is only selling Q units at this point because that's also the point where they can maximize the profit or minimize the loss. So the firms usually don't remain in the market in the long run if this is the case. But in the short run, they may stay as long as there is a variable cost which is above the price.